Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out on a Sunday night. I'm going to need my glasses. I grew up on a tiny farm town in western Massachusetts, but from 1982 to about 1995, I played in a succession of punk rock bands that I promise you have never heard of. This is because, of course, before the internet, self-promotion was impossible. And even if you could pack the local VFW hall with all your buddies, travel 10 miles in any direction, no one has ever heard of you. The holy grail in those days was landing a college gig. And through some miracle, a band that I was in landed a gig at a private college that was actually world-renowned. What it was world-renowned for, I'll get to in a minute. But at the time, we were just so thrilled to have a road trip that any details could just wait. And so we prepared for this big gig, and additional information slowly started to trickle in. We'd be sharing the bill with an on-campus band. Awesome! We'd never had an opening act before. Oh, we were actually opening for them. Well, that's good too, I guess. Now, keep in mind, this was back before all the world's information was just a mouse click away. So it came as quite a shock when just days before the gig, we learned that the world-renowned college we would be playing at was world-renowned for being a college for the deaf. But hey, a gig's a gig. So we packed our gear, jumped in the car, and headed south towards Washington in the unknown. The deaf unknown. When we arrived at the campus, the guards at the guard shack had no idea who we were or why we were there, and they knew nothing about a punk rock show scheduled for that night. Or ever. So we did what we always did in these situations. We just wandered around looking for the guy with the worst haircut. And we found him, and he was the show organizer. He then led us to the venue, which was a community room, a tiny community room with an even tinier stage. And we hadn't met the band we were going to be opening for, but their huge, obnoxious stacks of equipment took up 95% of the stage. Really pissed us off. So we shoved some out of the way and made some room, and we plugged in for sound check and started playing chords and yelling, "Check 1, 2," into the mic, like we'd seen bands do. And the sound guy immediately came out from behind the soundboard, shaking his head in that infuriating way sound guys always do. But instead of telling us to turn it down, he said, "Guys, you're going to have to play a lot louder than that." Louder? No one's ever asked us to play louder. "Everybody's deaf," he said. And then he gave the universal sign for duh. So we cranked up our amps as loud as they would go, and I watched as the sound guy pushed every lever on the board all the way up to the top. He still looked dubious, but it sounded pretty goddamn loud to me. The place finally started to fill up, beer started to flow, and a cassette of punk rock songs was playing over the PA. Loud. But no one was shouting to be heard over the music. They were just signing at each other and drinking beer like maniacs. Like maybe 4 dozen deaf punk rockers drinking beer like it was a contest. So at least we all had that in common. Now, the other band finally arrived, and, we all tried to be friendly, but there's always that automatic competitive vibe between bands. And deaf or not, and they were all deaf, they wanted us to know for sure that this was their home turf, this was their crowd, and their smirks told us that. Now, at showtime, everyone got in position at the front of the stage, and the cassette was turned off, and nothing happened. No one introduced us. We didn't know what the hell to do. So we just ran out on stage, we strapped on our gear, and there was silence. And when I looked out, I just saw the audience doing this. We know now this is how a deaf audience applauds. Didn't know it then. Scared the crap out of us. Just a silent sea of waving hands. We didn't know what else to do, so we just launched into our set, which consisted of poorly executed Ramones covers and our own equally bad originals that were actually the same Ramones songs, but with our own lyrics over the top. And we were playing louder than we had ever played before, but we just weren't getting through to anybody. There was no crowd response. There was no energy. There was no moment of punk rock jump off. Now, the deaf may applaud in a unique way, but they boo in a much more universal fashion. And then they started throwing stuff at us. But just seconds before it got irredeemably out of hand, the guys in the other band, the guys we were sure were jerks, ran out on stage, turned on all their equipment, and then plugged our guitars into their gear. When our bass player started to play again, it felt like someone was hitting me in the back with an axe handle. The first chord I hit was so loud, my vision actually got blurry. And when any of us even whispered into a microphone, it sounded like bombs were going off all around us. The crowd finally went nuts. A swirling mosh pit instantly formed right in front of me. Punk rock jump off. And it was so loud. I can't stress this enough, how loud it was. But ironically, on stage, we couldn't hear a goddamn thing. Just this constant roar that sounded like we were standing inside of a jet engine that was inside of another jet engine. And from the stage, I could look out and I could see people feeling the music, and I watched their bodies reacting to it. They weren't dancing. They were letting the pressure waves coming out of all those amplifiers just sort of push their bodies around like they were chest deep in a changing tide. It's one of the most amazing things I have ever seen. Now, we played nonstop for almost an hour, which is quite a trick when you only know 9 songs and they're all only 2 minutes long. But we pulled it off, and when we finished, we got the hands. And this time it was awesome. Now, when we finally packed up and left, we couldn't get over how differently everything felt after a good gig. Because none of us had ever had a good gig before. It was like the whole world had slowed down. And we were just speechless, driving home, grinning and nodding at each other. The car even seemed to run smoother. And we couldn't get over what a peaceful and quiet city Washington, D.C. was late on a Saturday night at the height of the crack epidemic. And then, shaking us out of our reverie, 4 police cars shot past us in quick succession with all their lights blazing. But we didn't hear their sirens. And that seemed pretty odd. And that's when we realized we were all totally deaf. Thank you.